So after 4 games, Ajax sit top of the group, and so I had to look at what Ajax were doing well. Of course, this was against Bayern without the likes of Schüller and Bull, but regardless, it was fascinating to look at Ajax's 4-1-4-1 and especially the flexibility of their midfield three and their focus on building up through their right-hand side. With that, let's get into it. We're starting with a long ball out towards Quinn at right back in what is essentially a 2-3 deep build-up with Zadrazil and Lohman supporting Stanway. This being up against Ajax's 4-1-4-1 or 4-1-2-3 shape of Lohman and Zadrazil. Zadrazil was the more likely to drop and support Stanway. That frees Lohman up to use her strong running ability between the lines. Speaking of running, note how Dolman will drop off the defensive line and also narrow, drawing the fullback with her, creating the space for Damjanovic to run into in a 1v1 against the Sanders. Damjanovic loved to position in those wide spaces to try and exploit the space left behind by the Ajax fullbacks, especially on the occasions when Ajax were in possession, looking to try and create 1v1s against herself and the Ajax centre-backs. Bayern end up retreating here, with Stanway dropping into a central centre-back position, allowing Viggostatir and Tamara Eriksson's sub this game to split. This 3-1 shape could also be achieved by having Zadrazil drop into one of their centre-back roles with Stanway sitting in CDM instead. From this deep-lying position, Stanway was happy to play long diagonals to free either of the two marauding fullbacks. Bayern's fullbacks could advance in those wide spaces because Bayern's wide midfielders typically narrowed into central spaces to draw the Ajax fullbacks narrow too. The Bayern wide midfielders' narrow position also pinned Ajax's wide midfielders Grant and Hoekstra relatively narrow too, because they want to prevent easy passes through the lines for the Bayern centre-backs or Stanway into those narrow forwards. As on this occasion, we saw a run by Ket from in to out. This underlapping run looks to create a gap between the centre-back and full-back. These unselfish runs were essentially used to both create those passing lanes, but also space to dribble into from players out wide, such as Quinn. Fortunately for Ajax, they defend this attack, and we see what I thought was their most dangerous route to goal, that being counter-attacks, utilising the pace and ingenuity of Luchter, as well as the very advanced positions of the Bayern fullbacks, by extension, the fullbacks' inability to be able to cover for their centre-backs who are holding an extremely high line. Of course, typically Bayern are looking to counter-press to prevent their centre-backs from being exposed quite like this. Whilst Bayern were strong in their tackle on those counter-presses, occasionally their forwards didn't reset quick enough and Ajax actually got into quite dangerous positions. Moving to the 23rd minute with Ajax building up in a 2-3 or 2-5 deep versus Bayern in this 4-1-3-2 shape, where Bayern's press is looking to man mark and press towards the near side. Typically this was Ajax's right-hand side as they sought to try and utilise Spitzer's passing ability. This occasionally involved some tweaking to the starting positions of players, so sometimes that was De Sanders stepping up into more of a centre defensive midfield position to disrupt this 4-1-3-2 Bayern press, or one of our wide centre midfielders in Noordam dropping to right back, freeing Kaiser to be able to push higher up on that right-hand side and get closer to her wide midfielder Grant, in the hope that Spitzer's long passing range is better contested by those two. Further to the Sanders stepping into midfield, when she did this, it allowed Spitzer and the left-back Reardon to essentially play as split centre-backs, allowing them to choose to switch possession back to that left-hand side if Bayern were too well set up on Ajax's right. Fortunately for Bayern, their aggression pays off and they get back in possession, but Ajax then quickly regain possession themselves as Bayern, which they had a propensity to do this game, saw an early through ball which didn't connect with Dolman. From Van Eyck's quick throw out into Johannes, I think it'd be nice to just highlight how her, Grant and Luchter were extremely difficult to stop given their close control and their ability to roll players that track them too tightly. Anyway, from the Ajax free kick, we get to see that 2-3-5 and Spitzer's crisp passing through the lines into one of the narrow forwards, on this occasion Grant, dropping. Of course, Grant is tracked, but that of course creates space for Kaiser, the right back, if Grant and her supporting centre midfielders are able to combine and play the ball in behind. Just as with the Bayern forwards narrowing, Ajax's forwards narrowing creates the same problem for Bayern's defence, potentially creating spaces between centre-backs and fullbacks, as well as vulnerabilities in that space between the lines. I like this scenario because we get to see those mechanisms be rinsed and repeated, so we get that with a bit of deja vu here. However, I just wanted to note how Ajax's fullbacks, as mentioned earlier, tried to push higher, and given the position of the Bayern forwards here, you can see that this is quite a precarious position for Ajax. There's a of potential for a lot of reward and a lot of loss. Ignoring the precariousness, we get to see Ajax's midfield three and their flexibility being demonstrated here, with now Van Gool, who at least on paper is the CDM, the highest of the three, with Johannes and Noordam both dropping here to support their centre-backs in the build-up. And so just as she might during short goal kicks, we see Noordam positioned here almost at that right-back position, whilst Johannes is tracking back to push into that central centre-back position, helping to facilitate Ajax's width, and of course that being demonstrated with the very high position of their fullback. Unfortunately for Ajax, the initial gambit of getting around that first line of Bayern pressure works, but Noordam isn't able to connect with Leuchter on her long ball, and so they aren't able to exploit Bayern's high line. But fortunately for us, we get to see Ajax aggressively counter press. We can see the man marking behind the initial line of pressure and how Ajax were able to force or rush Vigostatier into a long ball, and rinse and repeat. I briefly wanted to have a look at the 28th minute, because in this 4-1-2-3 press, Ajax varied the position of their wide midfielders, with Grant being the higher of herself and Hoekstra, Grant being expected to press both towards Taimara and then Nashwing if Bayern decide to come out towards this left-hand side. However, Bayern prefer to go down their right, and Ajax already set up to track the players dropping in that left-hand side. And so with that setup and Ajax's intensity, the initial pressure of that 4-1-2-3 press is bypassed by Bayern Munich in their 2-3-2-3 shape. However, despite the fact that Bayern are set up to play the ball up the line into a forward, here Dahlmann dropping to then lay off to an unrushing number 8, Ajax managed to create sufficient pressure to force an error and a turnover in their favour. Fortunately for Bayern, Johannes isn't able to retain possession for very long. Skipping to the 73rd minute, with Ajax building up in this 2-4 shape versus Bayern's 4-4-2. Again, Spitzer threading the needle into forwards dropping off the line. At this point, Bayern have made a number of substitutions, bringing on attacking juggernauts in Magul and Harder and Beijing to try and refresh their attack. There was definitely a greater onus on the fullbacks creating for the forwards, and Stanway getting towards the edge of the box to contest half clearances. Of course, in this 2-3 or 2-1 build-up, we're still getting underlapping runs, but now by Beijing and Lohmann, again looking to try and pull centre-backs into uncomfortable positions. With Beijing's run in that right-hand side, we can see the disarray that has left the Ajax defence in, and the progress that Bayern can make with Bayern subs, and of course tiredness on the part of Ajax, as well as reduced cohesion given the subs. Bayern's players were able to, through their slick passing and more aggressive positioning, force Ajax deeper, allowing the likes of Nashwing and Gwyn to be able to push higher up the pitch, as well as also Stanway. And of course, with all that control that those subs brought, by the time the cross comes in from the left-hand side, you can see just how much Bayern have loaded the box, of course improving the chance of conversion. Okay, so with that, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, consider sharing it on social media, subscribing, and leaving a comment on who you think is best set up given injuries, tactics, etc., to make it through to the knockout stages. And with that, we're out.